point is that you have your axiom. I'm saying, okay, so you're just saying I don't have a reason to believe this. I just kind of it's there. Here's my axiom. This is where I have to start at. And then you say something like, okay, now you're saying this axiom is the necessary precondition, right? So presumably you have an argument for that, even though I'm saying, okay, sure, this other one's an axiom. That one's not an axiom as well, is it?
Yeah, that's a fair point. I just wanted to ask you, so you're like a transcendental idealist. What are you?
Yeah, I'm a transcendental idealist personally.
So under that category, you would be like an agnostic, right?
I consider myself an atheist, but like it's going to depend on the way that you define it. Like with respect to like a Christian God, I'm atheistic. If
Yeah,
you're asking about like
let's define God as the creator of the universe. What do you think about that?
I don't see a good reason to believe in one. But I'm not super hard set on like there's no like ultimate mind or something like that. I don't know what I think about that, to be honest.
So why do you think there is no good reason to believe?
Well, because I honestly have never ran into anyone that could give me a very good reason. Most of it just kind of turns into a lot of mental gymnastics, some degrees of dishonesty, unwillingness to, deal with the contradictions that come from their systems, those sorts of things. I've yet to run into a precept that could even give me a very good argument for God being the necessary precondition. Like I've not heard a very good argument for that at all, even though I've heard it a million times.
So you think there's no good argument that God created the universe?
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Yeah, but what if we say that the universe was created as something that's not universe?
Um. Wait. What?
If the universe was created by something that's not the universe, something that's timeless and spaceless, because it's not the universe, right?
I mean, that's just a claim. I don't know what that's. I'm not even sure if that has like a whole lot of meaning, because when I say the word the universe, I mean all of existence. Like I'm going to be the largest possible box, maybe something like reality is what I'm looking at. So the biggest possible box that you could put everything in, is the thing that I understand the saying, like that God created, not just like our observable universe or our current temporal space time, but like all of it.
Okay, let's
And
define it as the physical world. What do you think about that definition?
I don't know that I'm willing to like say just the physical world, because I don't even think that's the position that a Christian would hold, right? Like God created the spiritual world too, right?
Yeah, but we're not discussing Christianity now. We're examining your worldview. So, what about the physical world being created?
Well, wait a second. I thought we were. Why are we not discussing Christianity?
Because I'm just curious about your worldview.
Um, that seems odd though. Like the claim that I thought we were talking about was that God is the necessary precondition for all of intelligibility, and I thought this was going somewhere.
No, no, I'm asking what is the necessary precondition for intelligibility? If it's not,
Um, I'm not. I'm not sure that there are like. I'm not sure that there are these like transcendental necessity necessary things. I don't know what I think about that. Like, um, I've heard some arguments for like platonic forms as a necessary precondition, but I think those fail to like the third man argument. I've heard the idea that um, I'm trying to think of all the different positions, but without really knowing what, like, if you're an Orthodox, if you're a Calvinist, if you're a whatever you
Wait,
are.
Tart, do you believe in nominalism
Yeah,
or
I lean in
conceptualism
favor of nominalism. Yeah.
or conceptualism?
Well, I lean in favor of nominalism, so I don't think that there's like I don't think there's like these abstract forms that unite anything, and I think that that sort of a position is going to commit you to an infinite regress if you try to take it, and so nominalism just seems like the more sensible position.
Huh. I thought you were a
but you,
transcendental idealist. You should be a conceptualist, right?
Well, there are issues where there are things where I disagree with Kant on, and I think that's probably a better held off for another time. But yeah, I'm open to discussing that if you want.
Okay.
so, Tart, so as a nominalist, you reject the existence of universals, right?
Well, in the hard sense, yes. So, like for instance, I don't think there's some platonic form out there called a square that's uniting other squares.
Yeah, but what do you mean in the hearts? What would be like non-hard sense?
Well, like a semantic sense. So, like when we use the term square, we have a something in mind that we're meaning, right? So we're saying squareness, but there's not this actual squareness, this form that's out there. It's just it reduces to like utterances. That's nominalism.
So you don't believe that's a universal? It's almost as squareness.
Yeah, I don't think that there's actually this form out there that unites all different squares. That would be like a platonic form, and I don't hold anything like that.
Do you think that's just language form?
Yeah, I think that our it just reduces to our utterances. We're just talking about things. It's just our way of categorizing them linguistically.
And how would you like? What would they be in reality if they're not united in any sense?
I'm not sure what you mean. Like, what would they be in reality? What does that mean?
Like particulars that have a squareness, property of squareness.
Well, they would just be particulars, right?
Right, but then like, so you think that only particulars exist?
Um, yeah. I mean, I don't think there's really any. I don't know if I'm like committed to like only particulars existing. It depends on like what we're talking about here. So, like for instance, if you're talking about like particulars that make up a singular thing or something like that, sure. If you're because I think that that is itself a particular. But if you mean like, do I only think that particulars exist as in like the atomized smallest subset of things? No, that's not really my position.
What's your position?
Well, what I just said.
Okay, so it's not only particulars that exist, right?
Um, well, like I said, it's going to depend on how you're defining particular. Like, can you give me a definition of what you take to be a particular?
Well, I would just say define it like some property of of the whole group. I think, or a class, like classes of things, like properties of classes.
Properties of classes. That sounds more like a universal.
Right. Then just say let's define class. You said that classes are like in your view they would just be language terms, right?
Yeah, take universals to be like to be utterances. Yeah.
So would you just define? Can we just define a particular as a single as an as a member of of a set? Let's define it like that.
A member of a set.
Yeah, member of a specified group. What do you think about that?
I don't have a major issue with defining it that way. I just don't know. Like, if we're talking about like members of specific groups or something, do you mean like so? For instance, my television would be a member of the set of reality, right? So the TV would be a particular within reality.
Yeah, let's yeah, like something like an item, like individual thing that has universal quality. That's what I mean. Like squares, squareness, polar squares. Like you understand what I'm trying to say?
Well, that has universal quality is going to be kind of weird because then I'm going to be having to like presume like that's a part of the definition that universal qualities exist, wouldn't I? That doesn't seem like a good idea. It's like,
Yeah, you got me on that one. So let's say, yeah, but I mean, only particulars exist physically. What do you think about that in the physical world?
I mean, I don't really have a view on that. I don't think. Like, I mean, my ontology is not going to be what you would probably imagine most ontologies being like. Um, yeah, partially because I'm not like metaphysically committed. Like when I'm talking about objects in the physical sense, because I'm a transcendental idealist, I think that those objects are extended in space time, but space and time are objects of perceptions. They're not things in themselves, right? So when I say something is physical, what I mean is probably something a little different than what you mean.
I'm
Would
just
you agree?
having trouble hearing a clear answer because you said that you were a nominalist and you just failed to defend nominalism at any point.
What do you mean failed to defend nominalism? What?
Well, you're just like I asked you a simple question: do you believe that only particulars exist? And you just failed to answer.
That's because you didn't define particulars correctly. You defined them
Well,
as universal.
I gave it like multiple definitions of a particular, and he was just
Tart, what do
monologue.
you view a particular as? Tart, are you there?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking to him. There was a lot of noise in my
No.
background.
I was
What
asking
was the
you. What
question?
do you view a particular as?
I'm gonna say something like like a concrete object. I would just say like a concrete object. So something being concrete is what I'm gonna say is particular. Whether or not I think those are the only thing that exists, I don't know. I guess it's gonna depend on like how you think about concrete. Like as long as you consider the mind a concrete thing as well, then sure.
Do you think abstract objects are particulars?
I don't think abstract objects exist.
Oh, you're not a Hegelian.
No.
Okay.
So just particulars would be concrete objects. Okay.
Yeah, that's usually what I mean when I say it's something like all I'm talking about when I talk about a square. Say, for instance, like my lamp is square shaped, right? I think that that's going to reduce to some sort of linguistic categorization. It's just our way of talking about objects. But that doesn't mean that there's this other thing out there uniting all squares. And I think
Do
there's a
the
good reason to believe that that position is false, which is called the third man problem. So if we hold that there has to be this abstract universal, presumably you're holding that there are abstract universals, correct?
No, I just wanted to ask you. So those you said that those are concrete objects. So I just wanted to ask you, do they have anything in common? All those concrete objects.
Yeah, lots of things in common. Like what do you want to know about them? So, for instance, squares share the property that I call them squares. So the linguistic property they're going to share in common, right?
So those are universals then, in that case.
Well, that would just be linguistically, not not like physically. Like I don't think there's this universal out there that's going to be uniting them. It's just going to be a linguistic thing again.
No, linguistic would just be to describe linguistics would just be to describe that universal, but they would still exist. Okay.
Why would I hold that a universal exists though? Like I think there's actually good reason to think that universals can't exist.
Because you said that all particulars are concrete objects that itself is a universal.
But objects is a thing of language, right? Like that's what a nominalist would say
They share concreteness.
in the linguistic
They,
sense.
in reality, like you're just using linguistics to describe it.
Well, no, that doesn't mean we're talking about it like a separate form, right? Like maybe are you trying to defend like Platonic realism? Is that what you're trying to defend here? Are you a Platonist? Do you think universals actually exist? Because I mean, I can give you a quick argument why that's not the case.
Yeah, give me a quick argument.
So if I say, for instance, that two things that are square share this common property, squareness, and squareness is the thing that unites the two squares, right? Well, now we have at least two things: the things that are concrete squares, things that are abstract squares, right? So presumably, if it's true that the premise, all things that are alike in this way have a property that they're going to share, then those two things are also going to need a property for which they share. So we're going to need another square to unite those squarenesses. So the squareness of reality and the squareness of abstraction. So we've united squareness of reality and squareness under abstraction under a meta abstraction, right? But now we have at least two different things again. We have squareness of abstraction in the meta sense and squareness of reality in the non-meta sense, right? Those are two different objects. So we're going to need another object in order to unite those, right? So this is going to lead to an infinite regress. So if you hold to like a Platonic realist position, the reason that this is for the most part rejected in academia nowadays is because it's called the third man problem. And there's not really a good solution to it. So this is why like Platonic realism is just rejected, right? like, is because you end up all you're doing is having an infinite regress.
Can't you have just something that, like, you just stop the regress? There's something that unifies all the particulars. including the ones that you mentioned, and that's it. Well, why there has to be an infinite regress?
Because for the premise to be true, for the thing that starts the infinite regress to be true, the uniting of these things, for that to be true, you have to keep going. That's the whole point. That's why the novelist says no, that's just false, right? It's just false that we have this specific abstract thing that's uniting all these other things. It's just going to be false. Is because the alternative is an infinite regress. Are you cool with an infinite regress?
No, of course.
Do you just like arbitrarily throw out, okay, well, there's this thing uniting it, or how do you solve the problem? Because for that first premise to be true, the thing that starts off the idea of Platonic realism, for that to be true, the infinite regress just follows from it. So either that's false and nominalism is true, or that's true and an infinite regress is true, which means there's not going to be this thing uniting everything. It's just going to keep going forever.
Would it be a problem for you to just write down an argument? I'm just curious to read the argument.
Yeah, it's called the third man problem. Hold on, I'll just grab you a quick. Let's go to Platonic realism. Problem with the third man. This is like going all the way back to Aristotle. This is getting to the real oldies. So here's no, that's not a very good paper on it. That one's kind of disorganized. It's kind of the thing is that at least in academia, this is kind of seen as like a decisive death blow to Platonic realism, because I would have been a Platonist otherwise. Let me find a good argument for it. Let's do. I don't know if there's any syllogistic format to it, because Aristotle didn't write like that. Let's see here.
To be honest, I hold to nominalism. I was just curious about Platonism. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, I think that. I think there's good reasons to reject Platonism, and this is kind of it's kind of the death blow to any Platonic form. So if you hold to there's these abstract universals, what you can't do, and I see I see people make this mistake often. They want to say, oh, well, let's just throw in something that unites everything. It's like, well, okay, well, now you have two things, right? You've got the thing that unites everything and everything that it unites. So you're going to need something to unite that too, right? And it doesn't matter how you formulate, how formulaic you try to make it. You end up with a third man problem every single time. If you hold that in order for two things to be united under some sort of an abstraction, you need something more than a linguistic reduction, then you're gonna need an abstract form.
Yeah, but what about that
for every abstract?
I believe in nominalism. But I wasn't arguing that.
Okay, so you're not a Platonic realist. Are you a nominalist? Or you fall?
A nominalist.
You're a nominalist?
Yeah.
So it seems strange to, I guess, attack nominalism. It seems like, because if we're going to talk about positions that we share, I mean, if you want to circle jerk with me, that's cool and all, but why would we? Why are we talking?
Don't worry, I'm not not in the mood to have a serious debate. I was just curious about, because let's say pure consciousness.
So wait, you think that God grounds pure consciousness?
Yeah.
Okay. What is a grounding relationship? What does that mean to you?
For God created the world, and He grounds human rationality and
I'm looking
provides
for like
humans
some
with
kind of a
intelligence.
definition for grounding. Like, what is it? If X is grounded by Y, what does it mean? What does that mean?
Like ultimate grounding, metaphysical grounding that is coming from God's mind directly into our heads.
Wait, so by grounding you mean coming from God's mind?
Yeah.
So, okay, this is going to get weird because then you're saying for God to ground, um, like all of mind or something. You said something to that effect. God grounds ultimate consciousness or something. So you're saying God's mind, like grounding is God's mind. I'm going like, well, what? I can't make sense of this. So for something to be grounded means that it comes from God's mind.
Yeah,
So what does it mean for God's mind to ground anything? Because then you're just saying God's mind, like something like God's mind is what things come from that are from God's mind.
yeah,
That's just like,
I was, yeah, ontologically.
yeah, that I mean, I don't even think that I don't even think there's a good reason to think that that type of quote unquote grounding exists. But that's usually not like what we mean when we say something is grounded. Like we mean
Okay,
so
how would you?
grounding is there's usually like two schools of grounding. I've talked quite a bit on here, so this is going to be a bit of a refresher for everybody because all of these people here have heard me talk about this several different times. So two different schools of grounding. So there's a unionist school and there's a separatist school. So the unionist school says something like grounding is going to be some sort of an explanation for something else, right? So like when we say that X grounds Y, what we mean is that X is the sufficient and total explanation for the existence of Y or for something about Y. Um, and then when we say, then there's also like within the unionist school, there's some that hold that something can ground something else by explaining it without being a total explanation of it. And that's a totally different like, kind of topic. Then there's the separatist school. The separatist school is usually going to say something like it's going to be like a deterministic relationship. So if X grounds Y, what we're talking about is some sort of a causality relationship. So for like, say for instance, what the grounds for my existence is going to be different based on what school you're talking about. So the grounds for my existence from the separatist school is going to be that my mom and dad copulated, they had sex, and they caused my existence, right? So then the grounding for my existence in the other sense, in the explanatory sense, the explanation is going to be something about my mind, about my me thinking, something like maybe something Cartesian even. I think therefore I am sort of thing might be a grounding relationship in the explanatory sense. So I'm trying to understand when you say God grounds things, do you use one of those two schools, or do you mean something totally different than what I just said?
I think I would go with causality.
Okay, so God God causes everyone else's minds, is what you're saying then. Hold on just a second. Sorry, my boyfriend's trying to talk to me. Just a second.
Another good way to look at grounding, Scargo, and it's kind of the method I approach things with is like, can you establish sort of a tautological relationship between things, right? Like if you can take the causal relationship down to its basis where you can't actually go any further than that explanation, right? Does that kind of make sense? Like identity. Like my grounding comes from identity, right? But that puts
Yeah,
me
it's
in
actually
a situation where like I actually have to identify what are the elements of that identity. Do you see what I'm saying?
yeah, that actually makes sense. Maybe that was not my best explanation. I think. Yeah,
No,
I
that's
don't
no big
actually
deal.
know.
This stuff gets actually rather complicated because everybody's like standards for grounding changes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I never engaged in a discussion like this about grounding, so I'm kind of confused. I really don't know much about it, and I don't know what to say about
And it seems odd to hold that God is like the necessary precondition. And usually, what they mean by a precondition is some kind of a grounding relationship. And then to not know anything about grounding, you're making a claim. And then, but why? Why are you making such like a grandiose claim about something that you don't really know anything about?
Well, I didn't know it worked like that. Like, it was a mistake, I guess.
Well, at least you're honest about it. Like, I think that's a good sign, at least.
Yeah, I wouldn't like beat yourself up about not knowing this stuff. I mean, it's like again, it does get rather complicated.
And I've never,
Yeah, I didn't know.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. I couldn't hear him. Was he saying something?
I said that you can go ahead if you wanted to say
Oh,
something.
okay. Sorry, you're breaking up for me. I was just gonna say, and I've never, when I'm looking at these discussions, I'm not looking at them like as a, a win and lose kind of thing. So like, if there's ever something that you don't know that I said that doesn't make any sense or something, feel free to ask. But it seems important to me, at least, that if we're going to talk about topics like grounding relationships, if that's going to be like the area of discussion, which is usually the area of discussion for a presup, it seems really important to kind of have a good grasp, at least of what you're trying to say by grounding. I can give you some articles and stuff if you want to read up on it. But and let me give you kind of a broad overview, because the two schools of grounding, there's an explanatory school, and then there's the sort of more causal sort of school. Those two things are to the two main schools, anyways. And usually the presup wants to say something like that God is this like grounding relationship, and then you can take either one of these two schools though, and you can demonstrate that God can't be the grounding relationship. So let's say, for instance, God is let's say by grounding we mean some sort of explanatory grounding. So God is the sufficient explanation for something, like usually they'll say something like universals, or it's going to be like the laws of logic, or something to that effect. But what's interesting is if you try to explain the laws of logic, you instantaneously end up in a circle, right? It's gonna magically turn into a circle, no matter what way you try to do it. It's not gonna make any sense. It's gonna be circular. So if there's an explanation for, let's say, for instance, the laws of thought or whatever, it can't be God, right? Because let's say I put God as a premise, God exists, and then we go, now I'm trying to derive from that the laws of thought. Well, I've already used the laws of thought, right? Like, just by putting a premise on the board, I've already used it. And so it's going to fail.
Don't you think that something would have to provide you, like something would have to establish those laws of thought? Something would have to like give you those laws.
No, I don't see why anything would have to do that.
You think that they would just exist as brute facts?
Well, I don't know what do you mean, like existing as brute facts? Like, I think that the laws of thought are, they're just our way of thinking about things. Like, that's what they're supposed to be. Like, when I say A is A, what I mean is that the thing that is the thing itself and the thing that I'm thinking of, those two things have to be identical for my reasoning to be correct. Right? That's what A is A means. Do you understand it differently than that?
Yeah, because I was looking at some kind of prescribed laws, but the way that you define them, they look like descriptive laws.
Well, I don't think that if you're asking whether or not they have like a normative quality, then I mean, my answer is yes. Yeah, they do have a normative quality to them, but they're prescriptive only in the sense that if we want for our reasoning like our reasoning from one premise to another to be representative of what we would see in reality, then these laws are what's going to hold. That's why A is like saying, okay, we have this thing, the thing that I'm thinking of, and then we have the object in itself. And as long as those two things are going to have the same qualities and same properties, then it's going to be itself.
And who or what informs you of these things?
Well, why would I need to be informed of that?
Well, something informs you. It's either you or if there's something external in reality that informs you about reality.
What do you mean? Why would I need something to inform me about reality?
Because otherwise you wouldn't know about it. Something needs to inform you about it. right?
But why?
Just to explain it to you, how would you know about reality if nothing informs you about reality?
Are you talking
Like,
about like the sensory perceptions? Is that what you're asking about?
yeah, like you use your sensory perception, right?
Oh yeah, I mean I use my sensory perceptions about reality, sure.
So your sensory perception informs you about reality. And
That's
something
the,
established the laws of thought on your sensory perception. Right?
why would why would the laws of thought be on my sensory perceptions?
Because you know that things cannot contradict each other in reality, right?
Because I know that things cannot contradict each other in reality. That means that something had to inform my sensory perceptions of these things.
Yeah. Like, how do you know that they won't start contradicting each other?
Well, I don't even think that that's literally what I mean by impossible, right?
Well, how do you know that a stone will continue being the stone and it won't suddenly like turn into something else?
Are you
Just
asking about like in induction? Is that the question?
I'm asking about induction and I'm asking about the law of non-contradiction, about both of those things. How do you
Well,
know
those
that
two things are distinct, right? So like the reason that a rock will continue being a rock is going to be a different reason than like why a rock is a rock, right? Those are two very distinct things. Like the reason that a rock continues being a rock is because I don't think that it can just poof into something else, and I don't know like why it would. Like, it
yeah,
needs a reason, right? Like it's going to need a reason to poof into something else. If there is a reason, then it could poof into something else. In fact, I think that this happens every day. If you look at, say, for instance, the stars, or if you look at the way matter interacts, some things do poof into other
yeah, but that's
things.
the reason why you believe it. That's not the reason why that's not going to happen. I didn't ask you about your beliefs. I asked you why that's not the case. Like why the stone just wouldn't turn into something else.
Oh yeah, law. It's going to be the laws of physics. It's just going to be like a nomological thing, not a logical thing.
What secures that there are the laws of physics?
Why would there need to be something to secure them?
Well, how do you know that they won't change in the future?
Well, that doesn't seem relevant, right? Like I thought we were talking about ontology, not my knowledge again. Like you keep jumping back and forth. Like 1 minute you're saying, okay, I didn't ask you about how didn't ask you about your knowledge of it. I'm talking about what actually keeps it from happening. And then when I talk about what actually keeps it from happening, you go, well, how do you know? Like which one do you want to talk about? Because those are two distinct questions.
Well, now I ask you how you know that they won't change the laws of physics. What secures that they don't change? That's what I asked you.
I don't think that I don't think that anything does secure them. That would be like it's just an odd question. Why would anything need to secure the laws of physics?
They always existed.
Depends on how you define always. Like, so for instance, I'm not convinced that like our universe is the first iteration of like an existence, right? Like maybe the universe is expanded and contracted an infinite number of times. I don't know, but within our sort of like space time from the beginning of time till now, the answer is no. The laws of physics have not always existed. They changed quite a bit. In fact, we don't actually understand going back to like the beginning of the expansion of space time. We don't really understand the laws of physics before a certain position. We can actually identify exactly where that's at. In the same way that we don't understand the laws of physics inside of a black hole.
How can you say that there's
we're
no
not-
good reason not to believe that they're going to change if they changed in the past?
Well, I don't think that there's a good reason to expect that they'll change because presumably there was a cause, there was a reason why they changed, right?
There
If
might be
if there's some reason that you have that you think they're going to change, then sure, yeah, I might be convinced that they're going to change in the future. But if there's not some like reason related to it, then I don't see a reason why they would.
but what prevents them from changing?
Well, that presumes there needs to be something to prevent that. There doesn't. Like, why would there need to be something
Because
preventing it?
you said it yourself. They changed in the past.
Well, that doesn't mean that something has to prevent them from changing in the future. In fact, they could change in the future, and we have good reason to think that maybe whenever the universe gets to a certain point, it may go into a big rip or it may go back into a contraction. And if it contracts, guess what happens? The laws of physics change. But there's going to
Give
be
me
a
a minute to
reason.
have a phone call start.
This has been very interesting. Thank you, Tartarus and Scargo. I enjoy your thinking, Tart.
Thanks, man. Thanks. Yeah, yeah. So I feel like I'm going over the same things I've gone over a few times, and I don't want to bore you guys with like going over it. So. Okay,
I mean, no,
good.
you're definitely not boring, my friend. I mean, I tend to agree with you on a lot of things, but it's nice to hear someone explain and someone's analysis from a different perspective. You know?
Thanks, man. I'm glad it's glad
someone
going over with
you know
them.
when someone is explaining it in a certifying butt blasting way, so it's very palpable.
Yeah, and I think that when we're talking about like securing things, like if you're gonna hold that everything needs something to secure it, then if God is a thing, then God's gonna need something to secure it, right? So the only way out of this is gonna be some sort of a special pleading. I
But
don't think
isn't
that everything needs something to secure it. I think that there's not. In fact, I think that Russell's analysis is good reason to think that there is something that was never secured by anything else, right? Like so.
isn't this exactly the problem Descartes faced with him trying to create his Archimedean lever? You're just not gonna be able to do that.
I don't even remember that one. The Archimedean lever. Descartes, Archimedean lever. Why am I not? Why is nothing coming to mind? Can you explain
So
it?
so I think when you look at Descartes' like other writing, he basically says that his whole reason for doing his meditations is that he was trying to find, like Archimedes' lever was like this story where Archimedes had like a lever fixed in space and time that he could like pull on to move the Earth.
Mm.
Right. So
Okay,
like
now I'm remembering. Okay, that
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah. So the Archimedean lever is that fixed ground, that point that by which you can build other things. But it just Descartes couldn't do it. No one,
Yeah.
the Archimedean lever has been eluding people for as long as the idea has been around. Which is rationally, you're not going to find one. Empirically, you're not going to find one. So
Yeah, I think that for the most part, maybe it'd be interesting to characterize like a presup argument as an attempt at an Archimedean lever. Right.
yeah, it
That's
is.
an interesting characterization. I hadn't thought about it that way. Now that you explained it, because I had literally when you're like, oh, the lever that can move the earth, I was like, oh my god, in my mind just like had a flashback all the way back to
Yeah,
like
yeah, of course, of course.
first year
Everyone
philosophy
knows what
course.
it
I was like, oh
exactly,
wow, I
exactly. Like
remember.
first year philosophy stuff. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like first year, like that was. Oh man, that was like a total flashback to the exact because my professor was like sitting in the front of the room and she made this funny motion about it, and I was re-envisioning that motion, and I can't believe that my mind managed to connect that motion all the way up to now because this is like
Hell
2 years ago.
hell yeah. Well,
Beautiful.
that's a cool thing about you know we can't forget basics, right? That stuff always carries through. Like especially as you gain more knowledge, it starts making more and more sense.
I can't tell you how many times I've had to go back and do refreshers of things because your mind can only really like sustain so much before you start forgetting important pieces of information, and then you have to go back and redo it in your studies. Like you run into some critique of something another, and you have to go, oh my god, what's that thing again? Oh, welcome back, welcome back.
Yeah, before you continue,
Yeah, I just wanted to
I want
say that I have to leave soon, like now actually. So I just wanted to thank you for the debate, and I think that I think that I changed my views a little. I think that I should be more critical about my positions, and that's what I realized.
That's a good man.
that's very honest of you. A lot of people can't do that, by the way.
Well, we can chat again, but it was good having a conversation with you. And feel free, hop back on. I'm always coming in VC, anyways. Feel free to jump in, and you know, I'm never debating. I'm always just chatting, but everyone else thinks it's debate, so it's interesting. So good to meet you.
Thank you for the discussion, Alan. I'll think about it. I'll try to fix my mindset.
All right, talk to you later, man. He's
Yeah.
nice and
Yeah,
good.
that was very nice.
He doesn't seem like someone who's like being dishonest about it or anything. I think that one of my largest frustrations is with presups is actually largely their attitude about it, because some of them feel the need to go on the attack, and these kind of conversations can be had in like a really casual and calm kind of way. And I think that's the better way to handle it. But a lot of them try very hard to mess up your thought process. That's what they're attempting to do, because they want to win the debate. They want to them. Yeah, I think he's probably playing with different ideas, and I've seen a few precepts that go through that phase where they're like, "Oh yeah, I don't have any grounds for such and such," and then they just kind of like go with it, and they never run into anyone who makes them kind of question their views and attack those views.
Well,
Mhm.